Hi besties. Quill, who usually followed close behind his mother, was always obedient. But the other mouse, Spiky, who was second in the file, was nervous and quite often forgot to freeze. Mattie, who came last in line, was just plain naughty. One night, when the young hedgehogs were 6 weeks old, Mattie caught the scent of the old boar upwind of them and broke away from her place in the file to see what he was doing. Ignoring her mother's grunts, she ran off, following the boar's scent. The exasperated sow led the two young boars in pursuit. The boar, closely followed by the excited Mattie, trotted down the path which led to his supper of bread and milk. He had hardly sunk his forefeet into the saucer before Mattie and the rest of the family arrived. The boar climbed into the saucer, which is the way hedgehogs, when they want to protect their food, do, and started to eat noisily. The sow and her young ran round the edge of the saucer, lapping up the spilt milk and occasionally snatching a mouthful of bread or milk from under the boar's hindquarters. He was furious, and his spitting and snarling brought the woman of the house to her kitchen window. All she could see was a mass of dark bodies against the white saucer, so she brought the electric torch and trained it on them through the window. In the beam of the torch, 4 startled pair of eyes shone green. The boar continued to eat with his back turned. He felt only contempt for humans and all their ways. When the light went out, the sow, Quill and Mattie ran back the way they had come, following their own scents into the shadows. But Spiky panicked and ran round the concrete surrounds of the house to the front garden, which adjoined the main road. The noise and the lights of the passing vehicles terrified him still further, and he flung himself shivering into a patch of nettles which stank of cats. The sow, followed by the other young hedgehogs, tried to trace him, but her fear of the traffic and the stench of the cats, which overlaid Spiky's scent, prevented her from finding him. She was forced to return to the nest at dawn without him. That afternoon, the women and the men from the bread and milk house found the little hedgehog cowering in their garden path. He cried pitifully when they picked him up. They realised that he was lost, so they filled a large flower pot with hay and laid it on his side in the back garden near the lane, where they knew the hedgehogs lived. They left a saucer of milk beside the flower pot, but Spiky was far too frightened to eat. He burrowed into the hay and stayed there that day and night. The next evening, the woman caught the old boar when he came for his supper and put him in the flower pot beside the baby, thinking that he might comfort Spiky and lead him home. But the boar, in a high temper at this interference with his plans, merely lapped up the milk and trotted off. The little hedgehog grew weaker and was obviously pining for his mother. He refused to take any food. The woman tried to squeeze drops of milk between his teeth, but sadly he turned his head away. The sow was still trying to find him. She even looked for him in the patch of nettles where he had originally taken refuge. But there was no scent trail to lead her to the flower pot, because Spiky had been carried there. As the days went by, she gradually forgot poor Spiky and concentrated on her other babies. In 6 days, Spiky had not stirred from his bed of hay. Each day he had refused to eat, although the woman had offered him chopped raw meat, bread and milk and even cream. His nose, which should have been cool and moist, began to grow dry and hot, and his eyes were hidden under the half-closed wrinkles. It was obvious that he was dying, but there was nothing that could be done. He was terrified of life without his mother, and on the 7th day he rolled over on his side and died. They buried him under an apple tree at the end of the garden. Mattie and Quill were now learning to hunt without their mother. Each night they followed the familiar trail, returning to the nest at daybreak. They often reached the saucer of bread and milk before the old boar and stole most of it. The woman of the house realised that she now had a whole family of hedgehogs to feed, so she changed the saucer for a soup plate. Each morning the plate was marked by the muddy paws of 3 or 4 sets of feet, but 2 sets were always much smaller than the others. The boar was old, and his teeth had lost their sharpness. His sight and hearing were failing, but his sense of smell was still as keen as ever. He was grateful for the bread and milk because the young hedgehogs had eaten most of the slugs and snails and other food in the gardens. Had he been younger, he would have hunted further afield, but he was set in his ways and a little tired. One night, after a party at the house, some corned beef sandwiches were left in the hedgehog's plate, covered with milk. The old boar arrived early and found the sandwiches so tasty that he ate them all and licked the plate dry. He had eaten nearly half a small loaf, as well as the meat and the corned beef, so he felt very full indeed. It was all he could do to drag himself into the shelter of the rhubarb patch. He lay on his back with his legs in the air, his stomach distended like an overfed kitten. The milkman found him there at 7 the next morning and playfully prodded him. The old boar glanced malevolently at him from his beady black eyes and scurried off into the hedge. That's part 4. I'll do one more part and that will be enough for now.